What is going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer from blueandgold.com with Todd Burlage, also from BGI here. Notre Dame Blue Gold game just wrapped up about 10 minutes ago, and we will be talking all things about the Blue Gold game. Todd, just first kind of quick opening thoughts. We had a couple things we want to get to. We'll get to both of our big takeaways from the game, but kind of just your initial thoughts. I thought the Peacock, maybe I shouldn't say this because people with pitchforks will come out, but I thought the Peacock stream was easy to get to for me. Thought they did a good job. Your thoughts on kind of the day overall?
I'm 53 years old and I pulled it off without a hitch. So absolutely, thumbs up to the Peacock. Yeah, I had no problems with it either, Michael. And it never had any glitches the entire program.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. So wanted to give a quick shout out to Notre Dame. Patrick Engel was our boots on the ground covering the spring game from inside Notre Dame Stadium. And this is a tweet from Patrick. He put out Notre Dame game days won't be the same without loose emoji. Salute to Notre Dame football PR for leaving a press box seat open. And you can see a picture of Lou. Just classy. By Notre Dame. Tragic passing, of course, 2 Saturdays ago with Lou Emoji dying of a heart attack, our senior editor. So please continue to keep his family in your thoughts and prayers. We'll really dive into this thing in just a minute. Please hit the thumbs up on this video if you're watching live, if you're watching the replay. Drop your questions. We will get to those a little bit later in the show here. Again, Mike Singer and Todd Burlage from blueandgold.com. Wanted to touch quickly on the offensive line since that's been such a big talking point this spring, Todd, for the Cone's team. I think Cone was gold. Yeah, Cone was on the gold team. Blake Fisher was at left tackle, Zeke Carell center. Josh Lugg, right tackle, Christophic, right guard, Quinn Carroll, left guard. So it seemed like Cohen had the majority of what we would assume is the first team offensive line. And then at Pine's offense, I believe it was that blue team, Tosh Baker, left tackle, Spindler, left guard, center was Dylan Gibbons, right tackle, Carmody, Michael Carmody, that is, and right guard, John Dirksen. Thought the O-line play was up and down. It's hard for an offensive line to get split in half, and then
right.
So what'd you think, Todd, about that offensive line?
I'll tell you what, the spring game, probably the offensive line is about the toughest position group to evaluate every year. They split them up a lot of times, like you said, Michael, and then you have to protect a quarterback that once he's touched, he's sacked. I thought it was interesting that Freeman did a little blitzing in the first half. I almost didn't think that was fair because you have touch sacks here.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm glad you gave the personnel groupings because I think that's what's most important to look at. Obviously, if you talk about Jack Cohn, it would certainly appear, since he essentially played the entire game. Meanwhile, Buckner came in for Pine. That maybe that gives us some hint to what the coaches are thinking for their opening day starter there a little bit.
So let's get right into our 10 takeaways. I will give 5, and Todd will give 5 as well. I will go first, and I think it's important that I go first with this, that there is just no reason to overreact. And I like to think, Todd, that I'm, not to say the voice of reason, because that was definitely Lou, but since I didn't grow up like a Notre Dame fan, or so I'm not like super pro Notre Dame, not super negative Notre Dame. So like Tyler Buckner was fantastic on the day. 6 of 9, 140 yards. Also had that touchdown run, led Notre Dame to 2 scores, the only quarterback to lead scoring touchdown drives, I should say. But I don't want to I don't think we should overreact to him in a positive way. Just like anything you saw, I don't think there's any reason to overreact in a negative way. It was a spring game. This is not the final groupings for what we're going to see in the fall. Like with the offensive line, that O-line group out there is not like a starting group. It's just kind
Right.
of mixtures of first, second, third team guys. So whether it's like going overboard on Tyler Buckner's our best quarterback on the team right now, or wow, insert player name here is terrible. Like, there's just no reason to overreact. What do you think, Todd?
Yeah, exactly. And and we have a tendency to do so, especially this year because we didn't get to see any spring practices. So this was sort of really all we had, other than those 3-minute clips that Notre Dame was sending out. Certainly, that's the natural reaction. But I guess you have to try to read a few things into it, Michael. And I guess if there was anything I was walked away a little bit concerned with, is the fact that Jack Cohen and Drew Pine were unable to lead a touchdown drive. Obviously, Buckner was able to lead two, but with all the big plays and really fairly lengthy drives in there, I was a little bit disappointed when they got in the red zone. They stalled out, which was not a problem last year, and certainly just failing to score touchdowns once they got into the red zone. I think it was 4 trips with 1 TD for the entire game, if I'm not mistaken. I guess it would have been 2 with that late one that Buckner led.
Yeah, so your top takeaway was quarterbacks. Quarterbacks a mixed bag. So let's take a look at those stats again. Pull those up on the screen. Drew Pine, 11 of 23, 146 yards, interception. Buckner again, 6 of 9, 140 yards. See that quarterback rating of 197. Thought he did a really nice job.
Yeah.
Jack Cohn attempted 32 passes in the spring game, 197 yards. And he was intercepted as well. I think it was when he threw out to his left and just a pass he should have never thrown. Shane Simon made a really nice play on the ball. So any other thoughts on the quarterbacks, Todd?
Well, yeah, I do, because there's something. I'm going to reference my stat sheet here. I think what was interesting to me is they were, both Pine and Cohen were hitting receivers downfield consistently. Let's see, Davis along of 24, Takix along of 25, Wilkins 32. Moving over to the other side, Keys had a 41 yarder. Lenzy a 37 yarder. Mitchell Evans had a 32 yarder. So when you look at, coaches talked about Cohn and Pine being able to stretch the field, they certainly showed that, and they were able to drive the ball downfield to a variety of receivers, which was encouraging. But again, they stalled out once they got into that red zone, and that's not something we're used to seeing here. Let me find it here real quick, Michael. Red zone, where are you? The third downs were really concerning to me. Notre Dame was 5 of 21 on third downs. That's going to have to be corrected there. And the red zones, they scored 5 times on 4 trips, 2 late touchdowns from Buckner. Neither Cohn nor Pine were able to lead a touchdown drive. So I guess that they were able to move the ball sort of between the 20s was great. But once they got to the 20, they weren't as good.
Yeah, moving into my second takeaway, I'm going to say the quarterbacks look good. There's certainly reasons for, concern a little bit, but I mean, things like Alex is saying can't evaluate pocket awareness with red jerseys on. Of course,
Right.
Buckner didn't. But then you have things like Nick Davis. He's saying 60 pass attempts, 0 touchdowns. Appreciate you guys in our YouTube live comments. Of course, if you want to drop a super chat, that is always appreciated. Just a way to kind of, if you like what we're doing here at Blue and Gold YouTube, you can drop a super chat and a tip for us. Again, if you like what we're doing. But, there were some really kind of nice splash plays from the quarterbacks. Like, let's talk about Buckner first. His first drive, I mean, he broke MTA's ankles. I mean, that was a beautiful 3 or 4 yard run. And then he was in an empty set, stared down, I want to say it was Tyree, but it might have been Kyron Williams, one of his running backs, and threw into double coverage. Might have been a pass interference, but a ball he should have just never thrown. But, that was like his first throw at the college level, in that kind of setting. So I'm not going to dog on him too much. I thought he looked like a big dude. Like, you see when the camera focused on Tyler Buckner, it certainly didn't look like Drew Pine when he was trotted out against Alabama, which I want to touch on that in a minute. That first play of the second half, when you mentioned that pass he had to Mitchell Evans, that was like a 4-play, 75-yard touchdown drive.
Yeah,
And that,
he
so
was Buckner on that particular drive was 3 of 3 passing for 68 yards. So he didn't waste any time moving him downfield on that one, Mike.
yeah, yeah, he was just killing it in the second half. He had that big, what was it? I think 41 yards to Braden Lenzy.
Yeah. Mhm.
There was a walk-on corner that Lenzy had that hitch and go on. So that's where I go back to the overreact. It's like, whoa, like look at this. And it was like like he threw a little bit behind Lenzy with a
Yeah.
walk-on corner out there. I'm not trying to like dog on Buckner or anything. I love Tyler Buckner, but just don't think there's like any reason to go one way or the other. Like if Buckner would have had a Phil Dracovic 2019 spring game performance, I would be on here like, guys, here's why Buckner is good. So I just knew after that game that people would be coming on here and just going crazy praise of Mr. Buckner. But I digress. So Todd, let's get into your second. Actually, before we get into your second point, I want to talk about a couple of the other quarterbacks. Drew Pine. I think he looked a little bit more of the part and just 4 months since really to the day, I believe, against Alabama. I thought he looked bigger, right, Todd? Like looked a little bit more like he, belonged at that level just from a size standpoint. He's still on the shorter side, and that's always going to be the knock about him. But think he's probably closer to 200, 205 pounds
Right.
at this point. Had a really nice throw on 3rd and 18 to Braden Lenzy for a 22-yard gain. That one stood out to me. He was intercepted by freshman safety Justin Walters. Pass was a little bit behind.
That was a bad ball. That
Yeah,
was
it was.
underthrown bad ball right there. And
Yeah.
I didn't like also, Michael, if we're going to talk about Pine, I believe it was Dexter Williams. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but on that one play, I don't know if it was supposed to be a handoff, sort of a shuffle to Williams. He did kind of toss it to him, and it ended up an incomplete pass, but it could have very easily been a fumble and a costly one. So I did respect his poise. I thought he played pretty well. What did he finish up there? 11 of 23. So the completion percentage certainly leaves something to be desired. 148 yards, and then the one bad pick.
Well, Dexter Williams, I think his last season was 2018. So
Oh,
I think it was Lawrence Keys coming in. So this is the things when you're going live that you can't edit out after Todd.
yeah. Dexter Williams, yeah.
That's funny.
I wasn't sure if it was Dexter Williams or Josh Adams, to be honest with you.
That's funny. But yeah, that interception, it was behind Lawrence Keys and a little bit late.
Yeah.
On some of his, I was taking
Kyron,
notes.
It was Kyron Williams.
Was it Kyron? Yeah. So I'm taking notes during the game, and Pine had some guys who were open, or at least passes he could have snuck in there. Pete says, Dexter, I wish. That's funny. And I kind of took a note. I still feel like his arm needs to get stronger. I can remember seeing him in high school, and he didn't have like elite arm strength. And I think it's gotten better. You see that in the spring game, and then those clips sent to us by the media. But still feel like that was something that he needed to improve on. And then literally right after I wrote that down in my notes, he delivered a beautiful 41-yard strike in between like 4 defenders. I don't remember who that was to. I think it was Keys. And Lawrence Keys was incredible.
Yeah, it was Keys.
I mean, 5 receptions, 115 yards, targeted, holy crap, 14 times.
They're going to need these. We've been waiting for this junior class to arrive forever, and I think Keys obviously at the top of that. Lenzy as well. He had a good game too, with 5 and 88. Yeah, these juniors. It's time for them to get going. We've been waiting and waiting and waiting. So it was nice to see Keys and Lenzy do their part today. Avery Davis was obviously outstanding as well.
That 14 targets, that just kind of took me by surprise that he was targeted.
Yeah, it doesn't mean now you mentioned it. I guess I didn't pick up on that when I was watching the game.
Yeah, I knew we got targeted a bunch, but I mean, now that I'm saying, 5 receptions on 14 targets is not a great hit rate, but hey, not bad. And then, Cone, thought he was solid. He didn't seem like a guy who had just had his 15th practice, with this team. Obviously, graduate transfer. from Wisconsin, but had command of the offense. He did have a bad read on that pass that was picked off by Shane Simon, but overall, thought Jack Cohn looked pretty darn good. All right, Todd, your second takeaway: defense active and good. Why don't you tell us about the defense a little bit?
Well, I think what I like was to play the linebackers and who the heck is Litchfield Adjavon?
Yeah,
Sophomore
safety.
safety.
Yeah, he's been on the bench the past couple years. Yeah, he looked good.
Yeah, he did. He did. I don't know if that will equate to any playing time for him, but man, couple big hits there, and was in the right position. Kind of a ball hawk today. He certainly made a bit of a name for himself. But I like the way Leofau played. Jack Kaiser also on the other side. It makes me wonder a little bit if we get a little bit of a glimpse into what Marcus Freeman is going to be thinking about as far as his safeties and his linebackers. Those two groups really stood out to me even more so than the fine defensive line that Notre Dame has. Now, clearly the defensive linemen did a great job, but I think what stood out at me is the speed and the activity of the linebackers, and obviously that is Freeman's sort of strong suit. So you just can't help but wonder if they're going to try to be a little bit more active. Again, I said it earlier in the show. I was surprised that they were bringing some blitzes. Maybe that's something they wanted to see Pine and Cone have to handle and see how they did handle it. So that was interesting to me. But I was impressed. I'm going to pull up this box score here, Mike, as we go here and look at some of the defensive stats. But I know, like I said, Leofau and Kaiser really stood out to me. Kaiser had the 8 total tackles, 5 of them solo. And then Leofau had 5 with 2 tackles for loss and a sack. Those guys jumped out at me as far as the top 2 dogs on the defense. And again, coming from those linebacker spots. And then prior, he had 4 tackles, 2 solo from a linebacker spot as well. So I like what I saw from the Notre Dame linebackers. And when you're talking about some of the loss they had to overcome with Owusu Koromoa gone, certainly, hopefully, Notre Dame's going to be in good hands in the fall.
Speaking of Usu Kormo, what did you think about his fall into the second round? I thought a good landing spot with the Browns, pretty talented team. What did you think about that, Todd, before we move on?
I was surprised. As a matter of fact, I wrote a story for the magazine that I'm going to have to hit Steve up because I called him a surefire first round lock. And so that story is going to have to be corrected a little bit. I was shocked because I think he certainly is first round talent. But again, Michael, is it the worst thing in the world that you end up with a really good football team, arguably the second best football team in the AFC? So all's well that ends well for sure.
Moving along here, I loved these young tight ends. The first play of the game, or one of them, excuse my memory, was one of the quarterbacks dumping it off to Kane Barong, who picked up about 8 yards. Barong played on both teams. He had that little white mesh jersey to go on in the gold team. Throughout the spring, I've been hearing really positive things about these young tight ends, and they certainly showed up in a big way. Let's scroll down and look at the receiving. Barong, 1 for 8 that I mentioned. Then when he went on the other team, I believe he also had a catch. Yeah, it was a 3-yard catch. I believe it was down near the red zone. But look at where is Mitchell Evans? Oh, he's over on this team. Yeah, 3 receptions on 3 targets for 59 yards.
Average of 20 almost.
Yeah. Someone tweeted me during the game because I put out just basically what I said, how impressive I've been with these guys. And someone said, isn't Mitchell Evans the guy who's supposed to end up being a tight end turned tackle? And that's not looking like the case. He's been impressive. Big dude. Of course, Michael Mayer was dressed, but I don't believe he played any snaps. You saw George Takis in there. Kevin Bauman, number 84, has been dinged up and not playing for the past few practices, not active in the spring game. So those freshman tight ends had to get used a lot, and they were effective. Especially, Mitchell Evans, that 6'5", 6'6" frame. I know he's listed at 6'7" as a high school recruit, but those are always a little bit embellished.
Showing him 6'6", 248 on the spring roster here. And yeah, I know you're talking about the young tight ends here, but it would be remiss if we skipped right over George Takis,
sure,
who was targeted 4 times and had 3 catches for 32 yards. He did a nice job too for them. And with Mayer being held out, yeah, it was nice to see some of these other guys. And certainly it looks like tight end U still is in good hands. Mitchell Evans really stuck out to me. He was all over the field making plays. Haven't seen a whole lot of him, didn't know a whole lot about him, but certainly he looks like a bright shining star in the future.
All right, let's move along here, Todd, to your next point, number 3. Offense miserable on third down. I know you touched on that earlier. Can you kind of expand on that point? What you see, with the offense in those situations?
Yeah, I got a little ahead of myself there early in the show because it was something I really wanted to hit on. But yeah, 5 of 21 combined. As a matter of fact, Notre Dame missed their first. They were 0 for 7 to start the game on third downs. That's troublesome. This team finished 8th in the country last year in third down conversions. So, and which is obviously one of the most important stats on the books. So that is a little bit disturbing. But again, Michael, we all need to just take a step back, realize it's a blue gold game, and not get too worked up about it. But it seemed like the throws when the field was tighter, I think both from Pine and Cone, at least to me, when the field shortened up, their accuracy went to hell. When they were kind of balling it out downfield, stretching the field, they were making some nice throws. But when you kind of had a little bit more, when you needed a little more precision, a little more touch, I didn't really see that from these two guys, especially as they got closer to their own goal line. And that obviously speaks to the reason that neither one of them was able to lead a touchdown drive.
Sure. I got a super chat here from Kevin Vaughn. Really appreciate that, as we always do. We have got to. Oh, that is not the right sound. We really appreciate that, Kevin, supporting our show here. So wanted to go to the unable to participate chart. This was tweeted out by our Patrick Engel. Kevin Austin has obviously been out this spring. He was seen on Thursday's practice, just in no pads, just kind of going through some stretching and whatnot. Kevin Bauman, like I mentioned, Brendan Clark, the quarterback, has been out all spring. Kyle Hamilton's been out, Jacob Lacey, of course, Paul Mwala, Jarrett Patterson. None of these guys have seen any action. Alex Peitsch, the long snapper, I guess I didn't really realize that he was been out.
Long snapper could get hurt.
Yeah, I didn't know. And so he was the freshman this past season. He's been out. Gabe Rubio was injured about halfway through. Will Schweitzer had surgery, and Drew White, Hunter Spears, and all those guys were able to participate. Wanted to.
Not too many surprises there, eh, Mike?
What's that?
Not too many surprises on that list.
Yeah. No, honestly, as I was reading that, Alex Peitsch was the only one I didn't realize he was out. And before I forget, I wanted to play this earlier. This was tweeted out by the Fighting Irish Twitter account. There's Tyler Buckner's touchdown, and he's celebrating there with Mayer, Spindler, Watts, Tyree. Neat moment for Tyler Buckner, his first time getting in the Notre Dame end zone. I'm sure a moment he will cherish for a long time. All right, moving along. I think it's my turn here, Todd, to go to number 4.
You look like Ian Book on that run.
Yeah, not bad there, huh? Number 4 for me I was impressed by Cam Hart and Ramon Henderson. A couple of real long corners playing the boundary. Ramon Henderson, I was really impressed with early on. He had a tackle for loss on Tyree in the red zone in the first quarter. I charted down. Joe Wilkins he matched up well against. Ramon Henderson was Notre Dame's prized defensive back recruit in the 2020 class. Of course, there was Landon Bartleson, but then he had off-the-field issues and never made his way to South Bend, and I believe he's now on West Virginia's team. Clarence Lewis ended up being the top corner recruit in that class. Well, Ramon Henderson's come along, I thought he looked good. Cam Hart was that guy who you're just looking at the DB group, Todd, and you're like, if he can get it together, then you're really cooking with gas. Because then you can keep Clarence Lewis out to the field. You don't have to put him to the boundary and then put Bracey in the field. You'd rather have Bracey kind of be a versatile guy where he could go to the field, but I like him in the nickel. So I think the kind of maybe not perfect scenario, but a really good one in my opinion would be Cam Hart in the boundary, Clarence Lewis to the field, and Bracey playing a nickel slot corner role. What did you have any other thoughts about those two guys?
I mean, yeah, I thought they played well for sure. I guess Henderson did have the one pass interference, but I thought that was a call that probably could have gone either way, in my opinion. I thought it was interesting as far as Cam Hart that the announcers were saying as they'd been talking to the coaches this week in preparation for the Blue Gold game that Cam Hart could easily be considered the defensive MVP of this spring season. And I guess that surprised me a little bit, but obviously it goes right to your point. He certainly played well today. And I liked one of our listeners right there, put it perfectly. He really did look confident out there. And boy, if there's one position on the field, maybe two, it's quarterback and cornerback. Now that you better look confident and be confident.
Sure. All right, Todd, let's see. Some standout performances. I know you had some on the offensive side of the ball, some on the defensive side of the ball that you wanted to talk about. So why don't you tell us about some of those guys? Chris Tyree, Avery Davis on offense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we've touched on them as we've kind of gone through our other points. So I'll just kind of fly through them here. Don't need to spend a ton of time on them. Chris Tyree, 10 carries, 43 yards. Showed his niftiness. He really does make people miss out in space. So I think the Notre Dame coaches have the challenge of making darn sure and getting him the ball in space. That is a dangerous combination with Kyron Williams, not Dexter Williams, with Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree. The way these two can make folks miss in space, man. They talked a lot about wanting to get bigger plays out of that running game. A lot of those I think will come this year through the passing game. I love the way Chris Tyree can catch the ball. He had a really nice catch there. It was an 18-yarder, had a couple catches. Was targeted 3 times. Obviously, Kyron Williams, he had a couple catches there as well. So I think when you add these guys and this young group of tight ends, as you already talked about, Mike, when you really can attack teams from a lot of different ways. You have your receivers, obviously, but when you can throw to these guys out of the backfield and they have that kind of escapability and breakaway speed, that is going to be an important and critical weapon that the Irish coaches really need to maximize this year. I didn't necessarily think they did so last year like they could have, but I think you're going to see it a lot more this year.
Yeah, my fifth takeaway was, Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree are superb. And I wanted to touch on as well them catching the ball out of the backfield. When you look at Lance Taylor as a coach and as a recruiter, he's all about his versatility. He is known in recruiting circles and coaching as the guy who helped develop Christian McCaffrey to what he is today, as the highest paid running back in the NFL, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe he's one of the highest paid running backs ever. So he was such a good runner, blocker, and receiver. That's what he's looking to do with Chris Tyree. That's what he's looking to do with Kyron Williams. Those guys have that talent. And then you look at recruiting in the 2021 class. Logan Diggs is a very versatile player. Audric Estime is a better pass-catching back than people realize. Both of those guys, Diggs and Estime, will arrive at Notre Dame in the summer. In the 2022 class, Jarian Price, who's committed now, the recruiting guy, is coming out. That's his game. One of his top targets is Gavin Sawchuk, who went to the same high school as Christian McCaffrey in Colorado, and that's kind of his game as well. Very versatile back. So love what Lance Taylor is doing with those running backs. And last takeaway from Utah before we dive into the questions was plenty of mistakes, which certainly could be critical in some real game situations, interceptions, pass interferences, missed throws. What do you want to touch on with some of those mistakes?
I guess, first of all, let's preface this by, again, explaining that this is a spring game scrimmage, so
Sure.
let's not put too much into it. But some of the penalties, while they weren't all that frequent, were, the kind that can really cost you. They were the 15 yarders on third downs, the pass interference, I believe was a third down play. And those are the things that keep opponents' drives going, obviously. Kirk Heinisch, he had what could have been a bad offside penalty along the Notre Dame defensive line, but then the Irish offense gave it right back with a false start penalty. So I think when Dylan Gibbons had the bad snap to Drew Pine that Pine had to track down. That could have ended tragically in a real game situation. So little things. Maybe I'm henpecking a little bit here when I talk about these, obviously, but those are the types of plays when you're talking about an entirely new offensive line and a new quarterback. These are the things you didn't get from Ian Book and last year's group very often at all. So that they're just going to have to really protect against that and work to clean that stuff up. All in all, it wasn't the end of the world, but at the same time, I just felt like some of those mistakes in a real game situation really could have turned momentum and really could have flipped the game.
Speaking of Ian Book, congrats to him on being a fourth round selection to the New Orleans Saints. It's funny. I was checking our YouTube page right around the time he was drafted, and I started getting all these comments on a video that in an interview I did with Matt Miller, who's he was with the NFL DraftScout.com, and since we recorded that video, he got picked up by ESPN. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Todd, but in that video, I didn't even realize it until these comments started coming in. He said in there, and I watched it back after I saw the comments, like, you pray to God that Ian Book gets picked up by a team like the New Orleans Saints because he can build with Sean Payton. And who did Book really look after as a quarterback, guys? He wants to be like Drew Brees, being 6 foot. Certainly makes a lot of sense there. All right, well, we're about 30 minutes in here, so we will just go into questions for a few minutes. Dylan Riggins says, anyone know where I can find the replay? It should either be on Fighting Irish TV. So if you don't know how to get Peacock, I don't know if you'll have much more success getting Fighting Irish TV, so good luck. But I think we have more info. If you just Google Fighting Irish TV, I'm sure you should be able to find that there. We had a question about the quarterbacks from Robert here. If they played a game tomorrow, who is your QB1? Todd, I'll let you tackle that first.
I love that question. I was going to throw that at you, Michael, so I'm glad Robert checked in with it. Obviously, I'm not going to get totally caught up in the Tyler Buckner hype, even though I'd like to. I guess I'm still more confident at this point, maybe not as confident as I was coming into this game, but I still am confident that Jack Cohn probably should be the number one starter. As I throw a probably in there, that Jack Cohn should be the day one starter. Just the been there, done that factor, I think, is really important with a young offensive line to kind of even help bring them along. I think if you threw a first-year starter behind what's going to be 4 new offensive linemen, you might have a real problem there. So I think he kind of brings that maturity and sort of that poise that Notre Dame is going to need. So at this point, for me, it'd be Jack Cohn.
And we have his passing progression up on the screen for YouTube audience. 18 completions, 32 attempts, 197 yards. Completion percentage 56%. Was sacked 4 times, which I don't know how you can exactly pick out what would be a sack and what wouldn't be a sack in a real game scenario. But hey, kind of the stats there for Jack Cohn. I would say it's Cohn. I don't think there's anything in the spring game nor all of spring ball to show that Cohn isn't the guy. Like, he came in, even though he had to compete for it, it was his job to lose, and I don't think he's done anything to lose the job. I don't think Drew Pine has done anything where it's like you have to start him, and I would fit Tyler Buckner in that group as well as Pine. Like, both have been impressive. I think Notre Dame is giving Drew Pine every shot to go win the job, but it's just going to be really tough. Kevin Vaughn says, I don't think 54 let up a sack. There were, let's see.
Which is impressive with the rules of today. I think it's a great point. You can hold up when a guy just gets a touch sack. That is very impressive.
Yeah. There were 9 sacks total in the game. But yeah, I don't know if Fisher did. I mean, whenever you saw him block, I mean, he looks great. In the
He does.
Peacock broadcast, it's funny saying Peacock broadcast. This is 2021 for you, but um, they mentioned like he's got a shot to start, and so does Rocco Spindler and Blake Fisher, behemoth. A lot of us pundits talked about, yeah, he might be too big. I remember saying this many times. If he's going to play as a true freshman, I thought it was going to be as a guard because I thought he might be too big. That it would be too big to slow him down against speedy pass rushers like Botelho and Foskey and some of these guys. But I've been proved wrong. I think he looks really good. Dropping dimes asked why was Mayer not a factor at all. I'm told he is healthy, but he's just not really needed. Right, right, Todd. I mean, you don't need to throw him out there and get hurt. You know what you have in Michael Mayer, so he was just held out as a precaution.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to look at these other guys. I mean, you know what you're going to get from Mayer. So why not run some of these other guys and look what they got from these other guys on top of that. So 6'6", 230 or 330 is what they list Fisher at. They did a nice tribute on him at halftime. I'm sorry, I digress a little bit here. On the kind of leader he was in high school. And I thought that was impressive as well. It sort of speaks to his character, and maybe indeed he is mature enough to step in there and even be a starter as a freshman at Notre Dame along the offensive line, which where's Lou when you need him, but I know it's very rare.
Oh, I asked him that many times, and I can't remember even his answers. We did them on these shows, and yeah, I mean, Hainsey played as a freshman. Steve Elmer, I believe. So those are the two names that come to the top of my mind. But I believe Hainsey would have been a red. I can't recite that like Lou though.
I think he was thrust in by need injury.
Sure.
So yeah, he did start some games there as a frosh.
All right, Kevin Vaughn says, other than Jarrett Patterson, did you think Fisher's as good as any other guy on the field today? Not 100% sure what you mean by that. Maybe like who's better than Fisher on the offensive line? I think that question asked. Like, I don't know. Josh Lugg, I still think is really good, versatile, can play any of the 5 spots on the offensive line. I think Rocco Spindler. I've been thoroughly impressed with him and what he's been able to show. Todd, just general thoughts about this offensive line?
You know what? I always find these spring games difficult to evaluate. So to answer a question like that is really tough to say that Lugg was better than Fisher, or Fisher was better than Lugg. I thought they all did an adequate job. In all honesty, this game with the rules, the touch sacks, there's times, Mike, where you'll get 13, 14, even more sacks than that in this game. So while 9 sacks allowed sounds like a lot, it's really not, frankly, given the rules. And I thought they did an adequate job, the entire unit on both sides, in the running game. It wasn't spectacular, but Tyree certainly averaged what was about 4.5 yards a carry, which isn't too bad. Again, not spectacular. But all in all, I thought the offensive line held up pretty well. It's really hard to evaluate, not seeing any spring practices, and then just trying to go off one spring game on trying to evaluate this offensive line. Hopefully we can get into some practices once fall camp opens. I think we'll be able to answer these questions a lot better.
Yeah, Kevin Vaughn says, 7-19 didn't beat him. I mean, Foskey and Botelho did look really good, and someone else talked about Harold S. Jr. says that it seemed like Tosh Baker really struggled. I know there was one play where you visibly saw him on a replay get beat by, I want to say it was Botelho. I off the top of my head, I don't really remember a ton about how Tosh Baker looked, but those defensive ends are just so darn good. Mike Elson's done such a good job with the defensive line recruiting. So when you break up the offensive line, that's such a group that needs chemistry. Defensive line, with how deep his group is, you can just put those guys in, turn them loose, and he certainly has really good depth there.
I know you hear it all the time. It's a little bit cliche, but think about how quickly these young linemen are going to have to come along, given who they're up against every practice and blocking. And even if it's 2s on 2s, Notre Dame's twos along that defensive line are as good as most colleges 1As, so I think that's only going to help build the talent and quite frankly accelerate the learning curve for these guys. And I thought we saw a little bit of it today.
Make sure you guys hit the thumbs up on this video, whether you're watching live or watching us back. And if you're live with us, please consider hitting a super chat to help support what we're doing here at Blue and Gold YouTube page. We are going to take a few more questions before we get out of here. Make sure you go to blueandgold.com for all NFL draft coverage and all of our coverage from the Blue Gold game. We'll also have more video content from both of those big events from this weekend. Rodney Felton says, how do you think Jordan Hotel to do today? I'm just going to guess he's meaning Jordan Johnson because that's what everyone wants to ask about. So Jordan Johnson, 0 catches, was targeted once.
Okay, I could never see twice.
What'd you think about? I mean, let's talk Jordan Johnson. What are you thinking about him, Todd? 'Cause I've never got to talk to you about Jordan Johnson, former 5-star receiver.
Yeah, I'm with everybody else. I want to see him on the field. I wanted to see him on the field last year. I think you need to jam him in there and see what he can do. Yeah, only 1 target in a spring game. That's a little bit surprising and a little bit disappointing. For some reason, I thought they threw him the ball a couple times. I remember that specific play. It really, nothing stood out about it. It wasn't a particularly well thrown ball. It wasn't anything Johnson did that he wasn't able to get a catch. I think you have to try to find a way to get him on the field, but if the coaches are there every day, they know the reasons why he's not. So hopefully he doesn't end up being a bust. I don't think he will. I still think he'll get his chance. But given sort of the uncertainty at this receiving core that we have coming into this season, I was hoping to hear more about him, Mike. I was hoping to Brian Kelly talk about how he's emerging and doing all the right things and those types of things. And to this point, we really haven't.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Nothing really to add. John says Evans is a tight end. Woo woo. Receiver makes us consistent. Would have liked to see some other folks mixed in. Yeah, I'm sure. Jordan Johnson, you would want to see more. Thought Lorenzo Styles looked all right. Targeted 5 times, caught 2 passes for 9 yards.
Yeah, mentioned a couple punts too.
What's that?
You fielded a couple punts too, yeah.
Yeah. That's why I thought as a recruit he was kind of a shoe-in as a guy who's like you're easily going to say he's going to play as a true freshman because I think he'll be the starting punt returner. But yeah, I think Mitchell Evans, he was one of my big takeaways from the spring game. He's a lot better than I thought. I thought that his whole freshman season, and this is still early to say that, but I thought his whole freshman season was just going to be really development, like learn tight end. Because in high school, Todd, he was a tight end / wildcat quarterback as a junior, and then his senior year, all quarterback. All he did was play quarterback and punted still. He's like a second-team Ohio punter. So he's coming in, and from what I've been told by those who've been able to watch practices, he's impressed. So tight end U continues to look good. I mean, Evans and Brong were 3-star recruits in that 2021 class. Brong was an Under Armour All-American and had offers from everybody before he picked Notre Dame real early. And then Evans, I think he picked Notre Dame, was like over Pitt and Florida State and Georgia Tech. And I know a lot of Notre Dame fans are like, why are we going to get a 3-star guy over those schools? Like, we're tight end U. Well, I think you're kind of starting to see that now because he looks really good. A couple questions. We got Hunter asking how the cornerback play was, and I'm not going to pronounce your name, my friend SS, because I don't want to butcher it. But how did the safeties play? You mentioned Litchfield Agevon early on in the show here. He was impressive. Of course, Kyle Hamilton did not play as he has been out, and there's no reason to rush him back. But KJ Wallace had a good game.
Yeah, he did.
Been impressed by him all spring. Let's see. We talked about the corners, Ramon Henderson and Cam Hart, who I was especially impressed with. I don't remember seeing a ton. I think Tariq Bracy had a decent spring game. Don't remember seeing a lot of Clarence Lewis. But yeah, I mean, I thought the DBs were good. I mean, the quarterbacks weren't super, like, I thought they looked good, but they didn't blow you away. There were some good chunk plays here and there, but overall I think that the DBs had a strong game in general. I would be remiss if I didn't say this. I want to mention it earlier when I talked about the don't overreact portion. When you have an inter-squad scrimmage like this, no matter what the outcome of the result of the outcome of the play is, you have reason to be mad. If there's a 2-yard run by the offense, you could be hooting and hollering and excited for the defense. You could be really pissed off by the offense. Like, no matter what happens, there's a reason to be upset or a reason to be excited. So I'm just going back to, like, there's no reason to super overreact to anything one way or the other. You'll know a lot more about this team when Notre Dame plays its first game of the season.
I seem to see a lot of DJ Brown out there,
Yep.
which was encouraging too. I don't know if we've mentioned him yet, so he was another one. Yeah, I think as a whole, collectively, I think the safeties and corners really did a nice job. I mean, 17-3 was your final score, so they're obviously doing something right.
Bobby asked, could this group in the defensive backfield end up being a strength of the defense? I think Andrew Mentalk at blueandgold.com wrote a story about that the safeties have gone from a question mark to a strong unit, and that's been without Kyle Hamilton this spring. So make sure you go to blueandgold.com to check out that article. Todd, any closing thoughts before we get out of here, man?
No, my one takeaway, I guess I walk away a little bit more concerned about the quarterback position than I was coming in, but I'm more encouraged by the defense. It's funny because we're celebrating the defensive backfield. Meanwhile, through all of spring, we celebrated the defensive front. And we started this show with me talking about how impressed I was with the linebackers.
Right.
So that's a good thing. I don't want to see these quarterbacks. They can't. It's not that I don't want to see it. They can't make some of the mistakes they made today in real live game situations. That's going to be something to watch for me. So the one thing I come away with, still a little sketchy on the quarterback situation, but feeling much better about the defense. You might.
So I'm a little bit higher. Like, I put in one of my takeaways. I thought the quarterbacks looked good, so I'm coming away a little bit more impressed with the quarterbacks than Todd here. But I think that you got to mention there, unless I'm wrong here and I've missed something, no injuries. Right? I don't remember seeing any guys going down. Hopefully there's nothing that lingers from the game, but that's huge. Like, that should be takeaway, number one, really, that there's no injuries to come out from this game. I mean, how much does, like, the staff take away from the spring game versus any other practice where they had, like, a Saturday scrimmage? That's something that I would love to know. Like, what do they really like? Is it more? Is it less? But for us, that was our first time seeing a full practice and good stuff from Notre Dame. Peacock stream was good if you're able to get it. And again, make sure you check out blueandgold.com for all the coverage from this spring game in the NFL draft. We'll have more videos today and tomorrow covering both of those big events. Appreciate you guys watching. We will catch you next time.